Courtney Bolsowitz has published work in Inscape and Context, and she also won Inscape's annual Creative Nonfiction Prize. She is currently at work on a collection of essays that explores the connections and disconnections we experience with others, the world around us, even with ourselves. Courtney's writing reveals goodness and honesty as she exposes the ways we intersect with others. With language at once lyrical and perceptive, Courtney draws you in and keeps you close as she examines subjects such as tattoos and cancer, her love of driving, the of meditation and the unit of electrical resistance, or the distance of the moon and loved ones, of those now gone and the not yet born. Courtney is kind and generous, and I'm lucky to know her as both a writer and a friend. Please welcome Courtney Bolsowitz, one of our best writers.
Thank you so much, Lee. That means a lot. So I'm going to read 3 flash pieces. The first one is called Letting Go. It was 11 o'clock on a school night, my senior year of high school. My mother and I sat in a diner, and I took a bite of lemon meringue pie. As I pressed the egg foam and lemon curd to the roof of my mouth with my tongue, I imagined the pillow my head should have been falling onto. My mother asked if I thought my father still loved her. Inside, I think she knew, but she wanted to know for sure, wanted her worst fears denied. I don't know how I answered. I only remember her eyes, reflective and heavy with tears. She restrained the teardrops as long as possible, but eventually they fell onto the cream-colored restaurant tabletop. A few weeks earlier, my father and I walked around our house, moving the sprinklers, watering a new section of the yard, when he told me he had fallen out of love with my mother. He had love for her, but wasn't in love. It seemed like such a casual conversation. I knew, though, that things were going to be different from then on. But maybe he wouldn't really leave. I wanted to ask what he needed, how I could fill the gap, make it better, but I couldn't do anything. I just moved the water again after 30 minutes. I had seen their love change, their words become biting, their hands distance themselves from one another, their arguments permeate the wall our bedrooms shared. I had felt what my father had confided. I didn't understand, however, why he called it falling. Falling implies a lack of control, an inescapable drop. I wasn't sure that was an accurate term for the state of my father's feelings. Was it out of his control to love his wife of 15 years? Does love run out eventually? I've only been married 7 years, but I believe we choose how much love we give, how alive we want to keep it, how green. Yes, love can abate, but not in one instance like a trip and tumble that the word fall implies. I don't think it was a single rapid movement that made my father's love hit the ground. I saw it waver down slowly. It's autumn and leaves are letting go of the bark, no longer able to hold the weight of the earlier seasons. The greens and pinks slowly perish to browns and reds. Leaves that have left maples litter playgrounds where school children play tag. People say the leaves are falling, but it seems like a release. A choice. It's almost as if the leaves themselves decide when to leave the branch, some holding on longer than others. It's not an unexpected thrust that pushes the foliage off, but a loosening and a letting go. An enzyme the tree produces, ungluing the leaf stem from branch. What was the enzyme between my father and mother? Bills, a lack of romance, an excess of pain? Leaves don't drop directly to the ground like a weighted apple heavy with juice. It can take time. They sway from side to side, allowing themselves to tumble in the wind, turning and rolling, floating yards away. Maybe that is what my dad wanted, to float away, no longer tethered to their marriage. He seemed to welcome the uncertainty, not knowing where he would land, but believing he would, hoping for peace that comes from settling in the grass, becoming something new. But I wonder if he knew that rejuvenation doesn't have to come from letting go, that not all leaves leave. Beech, oak, hornbeam, all hold on. Cedars never lose their green. Even in the colder months, some leaves rustle but stay, marcescence it's called. Though who can know when root rot or blister rust has taken over, and in that case maybe leaves have no other choice. Okay, this next piece is called Ink. A hairline scar bridges my husband's 2 clavicle bones at the base of his neck. Down and to the right, a caterpillar scar, large, raised, and shiny pink, lay on top of his right chest muscle. and 2 pinprick tattoos, simple black, dot the sides of his ribs, drawing an imaginary line through his body. Each mark was necessary. The scars, biopsies, the tattoos, a map the radiologists used to aim their treatment at his tumor. I love tattoos and have always kind of wanted one. A mandala on my shoulder, or maybe a small feather on the top of my foot. I also find tattoos pretty sexy on men, so it's interesting to me that I had such a hard time when my husband had to get tiny, almost missable tattoos for cancer treatment. Maybe it was because of that very reason. It was for cancer treatment. It wasn't a tattoo of a memory or symbol, something important to him. It was a moment of pain and sickness forever inked on his body. It seemed so primitive to me. I didn't realize it was. The oldest tattoo, according to archaeological research, was tapped into Otzi, the Iceman, who lived around 3300 BC. His mummified body revealed groups of parallel lines tattooed over his spine and ankles. Researchers believe the tattoos were likely created as a therapeutic remedy to treat pain. I wonder if it worked, if Otzi was relieved of his ailment. The fact that it was repeated all over his body in multiple groups makes me think that maybe it didn't, or else why would he have to keep having it done? Or maybe it was the perfect remedy, and so he kept returning to have his skin tapped black. The tattoos helped my husband be treated successfully, so again, why am I so angry at them? 2 small dots. For some reason, I don't mind what the scalpel did to Wayne. Both times I waited, not so patiently, but still appreciative of the work being done to save my husband's life during those surgeries. I was anxious for the surgeons to return and fill me in, how it went, what they found, how my husband was recovering. When they came out to give me the updates, we shook hands and I smiled to thank them. Radiation was different. There were no smiles at the end, no gratitude for the technicians or the beam that helped kill the remaining tumor. I sat there shaking my foot, scowling, biting my lip, angry at everyone in the radiology department. Maybe it was because it came after everything else. 2 surgeries, numberless blood draws, bone marrow and imaging tests, and 6 chemotherapy sessions, each one followed by a bone-aching shot I tried massaging out of his body every night. I think I wanted that to have been enough. I also think I was prepared for those things. I knew of people who had cancer. I knew what it entailed, or thought I did. Surgery, tests, those made sense. But who knew that hospitals were in the business of inking their patients? Wayne would jokingly say it gave him street cred. To me, though, it seemed as though the tattoos were just another way in which cancer was claiming its place. It's interesting how the ink in a tattoo takes over the skin. It's through the body's immune system. The ink is a predator, a wound the body sends certain types of blood cells to, called macrophages, to consume. But the body isn't strong or quick enough, probably especially when fighting off cancer. Cells that stay suspended in perpetuity will have already taken in the ink, and many of those macrophages will remain colored. Though a tattoo fades with time as your immune system tries to fight off the foreign dye, much of the ink will remain for a person's entire life because it is embedded so deeply into the skin. I realize now that the tattoo was like the tumor itself. It didn't belong, wasn't invited or wanted, but invaded anyway. Even after treatment, some of the tumor still remains, a matrix, the oncologists call it, small remnants of the grapefruit-sized tumor that took up residence between his heart and lungs, dead but still present. My eyes are no longer drawn to the tattoos every time he gets in the shower or takes off his shirt, but they still are there, reminders of the past, of the pain that pops back up with every checkup when he is in that waiting room. I am biting my lip again and wondering, is this it? Has the cancer come back somewhere else? Will Wayne need to go through treatment again? Will the doctors give him more tattoos to try and kill the new cancer? If so, shouldn't I be more accepting and grateful to the ink used to help save his life? Okay, this last piece is called Moon Leaving. I'm chasing the moon, trying to call to it like a loose dog or a distant lover or a loved one leaving. Stop, moon, don't go. Won't you miss holding hands with the ocean, making it curl in on itself in frenzy? At night, whenever I think of the moon or see its bright body, I get a sinking feeling in my stomach, knowing it is getting farther and farther away. I wonder what the moon looked like when I was born. It would have been over 3.5 feet closer then. From my perspective now, the moon looks barely the size of a round vanilla buttercream cake pinned up in the sky. The distance of its drift is slight, imperceptible to the human eye, 1.5 inches, 25.4 millimeters, 2.4 centimeters every year. So in reality, it probably looked no different when I was younger, especially because back then I didn't know the moon was leaving. Once I learned that the moon slowly slips away each year, I couldn't look at the bright gray rock the same. I had been enlightened by a sadness, eaten a piece of the fruit of knowledge, opened my eyes to pain, and it changed my perspective. With each inch and a half the moon moves, the earth gets shakier. As the moon drifts, the tides change. The land too. The land heaves and distorts itself bit by bit, coping with the disconnection. I'm trying to remain stabilized, trying to not take it personally that the moon wants to leave, that my loved ones are leaving too. My father left the earth, died 8 years ago. My mother, 8 months. Both losses feel only inches away. I try to find ways to close the gap between me and the moon, riding lifts at night when it's full, zooming in through lenses. I try to close the gap between my loved ones who have gone in me, wearing their clothes and jewelry, talking to their ghosts. But like land, I am tethered and can only reach so far. How many years would I have to go back to see the moon as Italo Calvino imagined it, scraping the earth? I would love to climb a ladder to the top of the moon like Calvino's characters do, sit with the satellite a bit, see if it will tell me why it's going. I have my own moon now, my round, pregnant belly, pale white and full, growing with my son inside. I am 5 weeks away from this moon leaving too. Currently bound together by the same blood, air, water, and inches of umbilical cord. Soon my baby will begin orbiting away from me, my own body starting the separation, pushing him out and away through waves of contractions. I want to promise I will stay, but that's impossible. Like the moon, like my mom and dad, like all of us, I am drifting away every year. Maybe I will end up where the moon is going. I will do all I can to stay, but my son will learn from life, and perhaps even looking at the moon, that nothing stays, that there are moments of fullness and moments of empty sky. But maybe if I never share the fruit, if I never tell him what I know about the moon leaving, then the moon will just be the moon, not an emblem of loss my baby calls to come back. Thank you.
Courtney's stuff is so beautiful. I am the worst. Okay, here we go. Okay. I thought I was only going to embarrass Madeline, but here we go. All right. Fiction writer Madeline Dresden dislikes being talked about, especially in public, even when people are saying very nice things. So curiously and quite foolishly, she asked me, perhaps her most verbose and saccharine friend, to do her introduction today, so this is going to be fun. I met Madeline about 6 years ago when we were both in a screenwriting class titled Philosophy and Film. This is where I first dubbed her Maddie Wan Kenobi for her extraordinary wisdom, but that's a story for another time. This association led to other opportunities for collaborative film writing, including the chance to work with the celebrated filmmaker who was responsible for multiple popular family films in the 70s and 80s. Madeline and I were charged with the task of refreshing one of his old scripts, a very dated tale about a Christian family's cowboys and Indians' travails in the Old West. Our job was to retain as much of the original story as possible while making it compelling, relevant, and valuable to an audience today, and also making it not racially horrible. This was not easy, but then Madeline brought her particular genius to bear. One morning she told me, I have an idea. Let's make it post-apocalyptic. At first, I was a hard sell. I did not think that Mad Max was the aesthetic we were shooting for here. Excuse me. But she explained her vision, and I listened, and it was very soon that I was wholeheartedly persuaded. This screenplay became one of the funnest projects I've ever worked on, and it's even rumored to have caught the interest of people who might be able to make something happen, but that is just a rumor. We're only writers, no one tells us anything. And why jinx it, right? Okay, so as an artist, Madeline was an early bloomer. She wrote her first book in the 5th grade and was already avant-garde enough to name her main characters after her favorite foods, macaroni and pizza. Today, her work often focuses on Asian American stories. She enjoys exploring themes of isolation and otherness in her writing. She loves a good villain and is disappointed by her own suspicions that she herself would make a lousy villain in real life. Madeline is also an accomplished teacher of writing. She was a finalist for the Ed M. and Minnie Berry Rowe Award for Excellence in Teaching, a distinction that I confess I truly envy and admire. Madeline has a broad repertoire of creative abilities. In addition to her novel project, her short fiction, and her screenwriting, she has also worked as a research assistant for the BYU Folklore Department, exploring the adaptation of fairy tales in contemporary television. And she currently works as a student producer at BYU Radio, which is another writing gig. She's also a talented illustrator, a cosplay genius, and she is fearless about experimenting with her hair. She also makes excellent Korean food. She is an MFA candidate in BYU's English graduate program. Remember her name because you're going to see it again. Please join me in welcoming my dear friend and partner in mischief, Madeline Dresden.
After that introduction, I feel like I have a lot to live up to, so thanks for that. Now I'm more nervous. Just kidding, that was great. So I'm going to read a piece of short fiction called The Ones Who Walked Away, a retelling of Ursula Le Guin's The Ones Who Walk Away from Amelas. France, 1944. They meet us on the open road and open fire before we reach our positions. We take cover as quickly as we can in the evacuated town ahead of us. As soon as the order is given, our squad rushes the enemy, guns blazing. The rest of the platoon follows on our heels, glad to be going in second. We beat the enemy back, but take heavy losses. Our orders are to hunker down in the southwest corner of the town and wait until dawn for reinforcements. No one fires at us, but we still peer around every corner and weave through the bombed-out buildings with caution. We crunch over broken glass like it's just more snow piling up on the silent streets. Our feet slide on empty artillery rounds as easily as they slide on the pink-spotted ice between buildings. What's left of our platoon spreads out around the city, finding places to wait out the bitter cold of night. Our squad picks out what looks to be a small cafe. Its entire front is riddled with man-sized explosions, perfect for peering out of. We step over the mess of patio chairs, careful not to catch our pants on the splintered bits of metal. We seat ourselves behind the service counter and pass out bags of bread and break open cans of beans. Our lieutenant, sure of our position, leaves us behind to check on the rest of the platoon. He leaves Private Blake with us. He'll be good, our lieutenant says. His whole squad is gone. They didn't take too kindly to replacements. Then he leans in close. He's just a kid, all right? We're not used to being stuck with strangers. Private Blake is quiet at first and doesn't seem to know what to do with his gun, his pack, or himself. First, he sits alone in a corner near the mops, but he soon looks them over and notices that their heads are clotted and they smell foul. So he shifts to sit closer to us, yet still manages to settle down on the filthiest spot of floor. Wordlessly, we slide him a plate of bread. When he puts out his hand to receive it, we see how slim his wrist is. We notice how baggy his clothes are. We see how smooth his dirty cheeks, how frightened his eyes. He looks like a child. "Where are you boys from?" he asks. Conversation isn't our strong suit, and most of our platoon knows that by now. They ignore the squad of silent soldiers that walks everywhere together. Private Blake looks like he's barely old enough to walk away from home, let alone into a war, and he doesn't know why rumors precede us. "We're from a near-perfect place," we say. "Woohoo," he says. "Well, get me some red shoes and I'll click them together for you." His hands are trembling as he tears up the bread. His smile is a little too tough. "Where are you from?" we ask. "Charleston." He raises his canteen to us and pretends to slosh around the ice inside. "The land of big brown waters." We've never heard it called that before. We raise our freezing canteens and he comes closer to clink his against ours, but no one can drink. "Bet you've never eaten frozen dinner before either," he says, gently kicking the plates at our feet. The congealed top of the frozen bean juice upends into the snow. "What I'd give for some mashed potatoes and cornbread. You ever eat cornbread before?" Some of us nod. He stays silent for a while, then he looks out the bombed-out opening of the front of the cafe. He stares at the sky and mirrors its gloom. "It's New Year's Eve," he says. He pulls off a more convincing smile and fishes out a grenade from his pack, holding it up. "Too bad we ain't got any real fireworks." He tosses it aside where it lodges into a pile of flour. "Enough about today." Blake sniffs and rubs a dirty finger under his nose. "Let's talk about something warm, like summer. What do you boys like to do? You like to fish?" "We ride." One of us mimes giddy-apping with reins. "Yeah? You mean you parachuted in when you could have pranced in like the cavalry?" He smiles even though we know how to take his joke. "Hastings used to get first place at the summer festival," one of us says. Hastings shakes his head. "That true?" Blake asks, kicking at his legs. "You a professional rider? Tell me about it." So, we tell him about the summer festival back home. We tell him about the bells and the towers by the sea, the boats sparkling with flags, the procession that became a dance, starting from the mountain behind the bay, down to the dunes of the sand-dusted shores. The people went dancing down to the sea. Little children with ribbons in their hair, somber men with gravity weighing down their ceremonial robes, mothers holding each other's babies for a change. In the green fields wait the youth with their horses, restless before the race. The dancing city lines up and passes them by, saluting the greens and the golds and the silver streamers in their manes. The excitement, the chill of morning, the bells, the bright white gold glare of snow on the mountains, the deep blue of the early woken sky. You read this in a book? He asks. We laugh, but not very hard. Someone lights up a cigarette. Private Blake's hands aren't trembling anymore. His smile turns mischievous. I got a line for you too, he says, and scrunches up his face as he tries to recall the verse. The cocks did crow, to woo, and the sun did shine so cold. Thus answered Johnny in his glory, and that was all his travel story. Our gloved hands give a muffled applause. Pleased, he blows kisses to the stars. Those are the words of an idiot who went off to find someone, but got lost. Private Blake scoots a little closer. Imagine that, letting someone leave who doesn't know what's good for them. How's that for literature? The gleam in his eye looks a little wild, and we don't have any way of responding either, so we hand him some more bread. The horse race was real, we say, and Hastings pulls out the pendant he wears around his neck. We show it to Blake. First place, he asks. So tell me, do you ride for the money or for the babes? We do it for the thrill. Now I know they're lying, Private Blake says to his grenade. But there were girls too, we say. He returns to us his full attention. So we tell him more about the races, the gathering at the green fields, the slim contestants on their slender-legged steeds, the joyous prancing and the bright gleam in the rider's eyes. We even tell him about the fat, small old woman who hands out flowers, and the tall, fair young men who wore them proudly in their hair. We remember aloud the old men who wore crumbs of pastries in their beards, the children who sported jelly on their faces, and how the smell of food lifted hundreds of noses in unison. Everyone's attention, however, was directed at the imminent race. The people gathering along the track were taller than the grass, but packed just as closely, and the girls wore enough color in their hair to stand out like flowers in a field. Then the trumpets, melancholic and imperial, would blare through the morning air. To announce the arrival of the king, Blake jokes. We have no king, we say. Our smiles ghost away. You sure? Because Camelot has a pretty famous king. We must look confused. Well, that's where you're getting this frou-frou from, right? You're into Camelot. Camelot? We shrug. Sounds close enough. I like the part about the girls, he says. Tell that part again. Hot and ready comes a voice from outside. Our lieutenant arrives and he tosses us some smokes and a box of matches. Been seeing some movement about a mile away. Might get hot soon, boys. Be ready. And then he's gone. Private Blake doesn't look so good. His hands start shaking again. Jeez. 1 minute we're talking about girls. The next, you know, we're stuffing our mouths with fire, waiting to get blown to bits. He lights up a cigarette and sucks on it. God knows how the world came to this. We know. We're not sure which one of us said it, but we all nod. Yeah? A strange look settles on Private Blake's face. Me too, I guess. Who needs God for answers when he doesn't run the show anymore? He laughs to himself and taps the front of his helmet, directing a salute to the heavens. We're here because someone didn't walk away from a fight, we say. He starts to laugh, but stops when he sees the steel in our eyes, mere windows to the locked steel doors just behind them. Ain't that the truth, he says thoughtfully. Maybe he wonders for the first time why our squad was the first one in, by choice. The lingerers who never fell back, the ones who never walked away. Nobody knew. Hot and ready comes a voice from out of the darkness. We can't prepare fast enough. We find ourselves face to face with flashes of light and a bombardment of bullets. We rush to take our positions. We drive the enemy back and chase them out of the city. Their bullets make pockets in the snow, and occasionally make trenches in our skin, but we hold them off. We are called on to move forward, to take up new positions, but before we can obey, Private Blake, suddenly quiet, shows us why his face has gone so pale. All the color in his body is flooding out of a hole in his left shoulder. There on the streets, he collapses, a halo of glass around his head. We press our hands over him and call for a medic, but we know there isn't one who can hear us. We send someone out anyway. Y'all gotta go, he says. Medic, we cry. Go, he tries to swat us. That's not our way, we say. We don't walk away anymore. His energy drains into the snow, melting it with bright red heat. Tell me more about heaven. He coughs. Blood pools onto his chin. You'll see it soon, we say. You're from there, aren't you? He asks. We ask him not to speak. You are. I know you are. I've always known what you are. Rest, our firmest command yet. Be at peace. Are there really going to be girls up there, with flowers in their hair for me? He asks. He asks in earnest. They like the ones who ride well, we say. In the dark, we can't tell if he's smiling or if the blood leaking from his mouth is dripping in just the right way. Hastings pulls out a medal and presses it to the boy's chest. We press too. Show them this. and they'll be impressed with you. Those kinds of girls aren't in heaven, he says, his breath slowing. Ask for Camelot then, we say. Yeah, that place sounds good. They're gonna be gold there too? Parties? Huh? Your Camelot got any of those? Absolutely. What am I still doing around here? He coughs some more and we stop pressing down on him so hard. Am I gonna be like you? He asks, grabbing our slippery red hands. Only if you walk away. From what? We don't answer, yet we feel the guilt that follows us everywhere. We continue soothing his heaving chest and stemming his flow of blood, though he only needs one of the two. It isn't real, is it? We can barely understand him. Blood clogs his mouth like runny red wax. It's just a story. He looks frightened. It is real, we say. It's a stupid place, he insists. It isn't real. It's a wonderful place, we say. Then why aren't you there? Why are you? He gags on blood. There was a price. We say it before he slips away. But heaven is better. Go there. Rest. You have no guilt to walk away from. You will find heaven waiting. He starts laughing. Angels, he hoots. We're not sure how well he can still see. Angels walking away from guilt? That's a good one. We freeze at his accusation. Angels? No, not angels. And then his eyes grow wide and his chest staggers, his mouth still forming words. Hot and ready, we hear our lieutenant's battle cry. We hear the artillery at our heels. There's no time. We form up, pick up our guns, straighten our helmets, relace our soggy boots, and we leave the kid behind. Thank you.
Zach Power grew up in the western United States, living in California, Arizona, Missouri, and Idaho before he was 20. He received his associates from Snow College in 2012 and a bachelor's in English from this fine university last year. He has been published in Inscape, BYU's creative writing magazine, and recently presented on the subject of substrate poetry at the Utah Academy of Science, Arts, and Letters in Salt Lake City. Zach's poetry is strange, ambitious, and challenging, and concerns itself with everything from post-jaded naivete to the paper it's printed on. In Domestic Meditations, a series of handwritten poems addressed to subjects like foreclosures, fatherhood, and anybody, he writes, "I'm sorry to say I can't say it straight," and signs them "Love Dad," with hesitation, water, and truly, ramifications. He is currently an MFA candidate in poetry. Eccentric, kind, and without guile, he's also one of our best. Please welcome Zach.
Hi, everyone. I don't get nervous, but I did pass out once giving a sacrament talk, so I hope that doesn't happen here. And I really appreciate Courtney and Madeline's pieces. They were beautiful in very different ways. I felt such emotion. Can you guys hear me? Oh, do I need to? Okay, no, we're good. All right. This first poem is untitled, and I like rivers, so I'm just going to start with that. When my mother asked my brother other ways to bother water, we together bashed the water with our water-beaten hands a-clapping, slapping brethren under water by the river slowly raging, like an infant crying softly, as a mother without water, weighing softly for a father, falling in a raging river laughing underwater. This second poem is titled Lacuna, and it's a collection of tiny letters to my mother. I think a lot of us like tiny things. This is kind of in that register. Lacuna. Dear Mom, when I gave birth to you, you cried like I did when you gave birth to me. Love, your faithful son. Dear Mom, before I gave birth to you, you sounded like a knocking on a melon, skull-bumped, tree-trunked, thumping acorn in my man-womb. Love, your solely son. Dear Mother, Sister left her number on my wrist, said call if Mother turns, turns out to be stillborn. Love, your meticulous son. Dear Mom, before I gave birth to you, I washed you with my hands, kissed your neck, and told the ocean you would be a moon all your life. Love, your undulating son. Dear Mom, the night you were born, you kissed my neck, rubbed my airy womb, and tenderly sealed my hollowness. Love, your asphyxiate son. Dear Mom, when I gave birth to you, when I hear you cry from the womb covered in water, I water the garden. I ask the doula to make something cold. Your underson. Dear Mother, I've been your mother since we shared that milk in the kitchen, since that brazen serpent bit us both. Love, your Moses son. Dear Mother, Brother says he is your mother. I gave birth to you first. If you recall seeing my swelling, swollen mind, the birth canal we built together under the beetroots. Love, your real son. This next poem is titled Metaphysical Throat. We pray to God, but I wondered what it would be like to pray to one part of God, one piece of God. Metaphysical Throat. I was gesturing ordinances underwater. I swam sacred strokes, left, right, left, holy, holy, my son in the river, dive, resurface, left, right, shore, shake. I confess, I left my son in the river. I regret my brother's teeth. I shouldn't have pulled each out so hard that night. My mother's tongue, shorter than sinews, thickless like tendons, unable to reach the neck. My wife's voice, she set it out in the sun to dry, but cracked, split, without blossom. O gullet of God, I have seen you roll Adam's apples, and from the silence sliding my ears crack. Ethereal esophagus, you understand thresholds, don't you? You understand threshing. When I pick up a Bible, I read a verse that said, Verily, verily, thou shalt leave thy son upon the brow of an ox, upon the shelf of a river, and he shall bow at the rising sun. I will follow the rocks. He shall not drown. This next poem, as a father, sometimes I find it difficult to answer children's questions, which are mystifying and wonderful in and of themselves. And this poem is titled Explanations Well Suited, and it comes out of that kind of effort or an imagination of that. Because the moon is, explanation well suited. Because the moon is held up in the sky by all the sleeping people's sleep. And if you don't go to bed, then I can't go to bed. And if I can't, then the moon won't have enough sleep to keep it up, and it will topple onto our house and crush your mother. And you love your mother, don't you? Because if we don't eat our food, then the tiny men that are holding onto our hairs will all let go, and your hair will just fall to the ground. Because the sound of you screaming also makes the front yard cringe. And last time your mother screamed, when we were first married, the yard cringed, right into the house and knocked out the front windows. And we had to play the piano for the window guy to fix our windows for weeks. Because the last time your mother and I were naked in the backyard, we were seized by something called intimacy, and we were stuck in each other's arms for days, until an arborist was cutting down the neighbor's trees and saved us from intimacy. And I'd hate for you to get stuck, so please put this diaper and clothes on. Because the cold that comes out of the freezer attracts a tribe of small women who will incessantly wash your hands until you have no hands, and then you can't open or close the freezer, and they slowly take control of the house, and you don't have hands and an open freezer that attracts more tribes of small women who will wash everything except the freezer, and like I said, keep the freezer closed. Because the tree doesn't like losing its branches, and the sun doesn't like it either. And once I wasn't paying attention, and the tree and sun ganged up on me and held my face against the sidewalk. Which is why I have all these spots on my cheek. Trust me, you don't want to get these spots, because there was a group of businessmen in the city that saw my spots, and they bought all of them. But I couldn't give them to them, even though they marketed them as freckles. So I just stayed in the city and let them own the market, the spots, until I could buy them back. I believe this is the last one. Yes. This last one is called False Metaphors. What did Elise write on a poem the other day? She said, we become our metaphors or something. Yeah, I think so. Where are you, Elise? Anyways. And then Wallace Stephen, he said, metaphors are how we escape the cliche of reality. We use metaphors all the time. Anytime you've used a chair as a ladder, you've used a metaphor. Because chairs are for sitting, not for climbing. Anyways, this one is titled False Metaphors. I am a painting on a wall that hangs with my hands behind my back. This is why people stand with their hands behind their back when they look at me. I am a chair that stands slightly under all sorts of tables, under all sorts of workspaces. Think about the time you were making cookies, and I stood underneath your arm and tasted the dough. My brain is like the snow. It falls in pieces I call words, in pieces you call snow. When I give a speech, I call it winter. You call it speech. There's no difference between the two. I am that piece of paper you crumpled up after class yesterday. For the first time ever, my back side felt my front side, and I actually have intricate viscera. My nose is a library. Each blackhead a bush, each hair a bookshelf, each particle of dust a novel. The mucus is a book club. The dried up skin is custodian. Walking home in the cold is a duck. There are speckles in the feathered sky, and I am an orange beak breaking through the water, searching for breadcrumbs. When summer comes, I walk north. Myself is an ecosystem. I've been standing in a swamp observing my childhood memory of rollerblading, which sits on a lily pad. I know that it will take the rollerblades off and hop in the water when it starts to rain. I have 3 dogs at home named Id, Ego, and Super Ego. When I take them on a walk, the only thing people want to know is how my day is going. I eat toast in the morning. This is a metaphor for how I like to eat bacon, eggs, and pancakes with maple syrup for breakfast. When the moon comes out, I think that the moon is a man curled up. I always wait for him to arch his back and stretch. I can never find my car keys. I can't uncook eggs. I am agog. There must be a metaphor there. Thank you.
So we've got time for, I think, maybe 2 or 3 questions. If our 3 authors wouldn't mind coming up here and maybe just kind of hovering around the mic. And if they feel like answering, whoever would like to answer the question can approach the microphone, but please feel free to ask them anything you'd like.
I thought about this this morning while I was sorry? Oh, repeat the question. Thanks, Mel. The question is, how do I feel about past writing? Is that a fair kind of summary of your question? So I was thinking earlier today, I was actually revising some of the poems, and some of these poems I wrote a while ago, long enough ago that I I felt like I couldn't get into the register anymore. Kind of like trying to get in my pants that I wore in kindergarten. They don't fit anymore. And I think past writing, sometimes you outgrow it in certain ways. So I do keep it, but at a certain point, I can't wear it anymore, and I have to move on, find new clothes, find new projects, find new things.
Benjamin?
So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you think has been the most significant change in the way that you approach your art. That's a hefty question.
Most significant way we approach our art. Not sure I quite understand the question, but yeah, clarify.
So I'm assuming you feel like a little bit more of a mature writer. What are the things that make, what understanding do you have that makes you feel like you're a more mature writer?
So what about writing now makes me feel like I'm more mature than I used to be as a writer? Is that a fair? Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the response that I get from other people. One thing that I've learned about being a mature writer is how to take critique and when not to take critique. So that is an important distinction to make. But for me, I think I just get I get more and more joy out of writing the more mature I think I am as a writer. And by mature, I mean, thematically or, with the way I string my sentences together, things like that. Yeah, does that answer your question? I get more joy out of it, I think, is the main thing.